Are these spot Bitcoin ETFs. Traders.
The last few months has been around the ETF, and you are such a key player at Green.
All the potential Bitcoin ETF filings that are.
It seems like it's only a matter of when the Bitcoin spot ETFs are approved, not if. Anyone pushing back on these applications have nowhere to turn now. January 10th is right around the corner and approval is looking more and more likely. But how will these ETFs actually affect the price of Bitcoin? What can we expect the price of Bitcoin to be 1 month after approval? What about 1 year? Let's find out. First, keep in mind this is not investment advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. Volatility. Something we haven't seen or heard too many people talk about is how ETFs will affect Bitcoin's volatility. Everyone wants to know, will Bitcoin skyrocket? We get it, and we'll get to that. But take a look at this article from Coindesk.com. One of the more interesting takes we've seen, and we think it's true. Bitcoin spot ETFs would lower volatility in Bitcoin because there would be a larger base of holders. So far it's been large whales and a lot of smaller traders. Now we could potentially see a wider swath of participants, as Coindesk mentions. Now volatility is not a bad thing. There is a lot of opportunity in volatility. In fact, you need volatility, but not quite to the extent we have seen with Bitcoin and in crypto in general. We think a reduction in volatility will actually be very beneficial because 1, Bitcoin will still remain a volatile asset, just not as bad as before, and 2, a reduction in volatility will be more in line with what institutional investors are looking for. Funds and other large institutions aren't buying Bitcoin for the short term. They are holding this in their portfolios for the long run, and wild swings in price throw off their metrics, performance, you name it. If anything, Bitcoin spot ETFs are giving institutions and traditional finance even more of a reason to get involved than we originally thought. This time it's just in less swings and more liquidity. Price. Obviously, these ETFs will affect the price of Bitcoin. They'll do this in more than one way. Increased adoption. A spot Bitcoin ETF is poised to draw considerable investments from conventional investors seeking Bitcoin exposure in their brokerage accounts. This surge in demand could potentially drive up Bitcoin prices as new investors and capital enter the market. Market confirmation. The approval and launch of a spot Bitcoin ETF would further affirm Bitcoin's legitimacy in the mainstream financial realm. This validation could strengthen trust in Bitcoins and fuel an upward trajectory in their value. Trading impact. A spot Bitcoin ETF could open up new avenues for active trading of Bitcoin exposure, attracting hedge funds, day traders, and speculative investors. This heightened activity might lead to increased trading volumes and greater market volatility. Cost to buy. Proponents argue that a spot Bitcoin ETF may diminish the premium that institutional investors typically pay for Bitcoin through trusts and private funds. This adjustment could exert a marginal downward pressure on Bitcoin prices. Okay, but what will the price of Bitcoin actually be once these are approved? Let's check out this article from Glassnode.com on the ETF's impact. Gold is an obvious comparison to Bitcoin because the ETFs sort of normalize or mainstream each asset that may have been a bit out of reach to some before. In Bitcoin's case, so are the asset's potentially largest investors. Gold's price went from $350 per ounce in 2003 to approximately $1,800 at its highest point in 2012. Will Bitcoin do the same? Glassnode calculates $70 billion in inflows to these ETFs, but it's unclear on their time frame. Galaxy Digital projected just $14 billion of inflows in Bitcoin's first year post-ETF launch. We think Galaxy's inflow projection is probably a bit low, although it's important to note they see this increasing every year for the next couple of years. We agree there. These ETFs will continue to pull money into Bitcoin for years to come. What is unclear is how long it will take to market and put together a spot Bitcoin ETF once approval is gained. And could $70 billion be a realistic inflow number for the first year? We think so. How much of that will be baked into Bitcoin's price once news of the approvals break? You know the saying? Buy the rumor, sell the news. In this case, we don't think we necessarily have to sell Bitcoin once the news hits. That's just the beginning. But a lot of money will pile into Bitcoin in anticipation of all of these inflows. We're expecting an increase in Bitcoin's price from $10,000 to $20,000 on approval alone. Let us know in the comments if you agree or think we're crazy. The way we see it is Bitcoin has gained a market cap of approximately $800 billion already. It's gained that much traction while asking investors to purchase Bitcoin in ways we never had to buy any other assets. There were never any wallets or oddball exchanges. Never such issues with regulation or so many barriers, yet Bitcoin has still managed a market cap of nearly $1 trillion. We think these ETFs push Bitcoin over $1 trillion market cap easily within the first 2 years. Supply. Of course, a lot of talk has been around supply too. A lot of buyers are holding Bitcoin long-term. Some in anticipation of ETF approval, some the halving, many for much longer time frames. Bitcoin has never been so illiquid, and as you've learned in economics, supply and demand are very important to an asset's price. High demand coupled with limited supply could send Bitcoin skyrocketing alone. Approval to operational. TheStreet.com points to off-the-chain Capital's Brian Dixon's timeline for how long it will take to launch an ETF after approval. Dixon states 30 to 45 days after approval is reasonable to expect an ETF launch and thus an influx of capital into the space. We would have assumed it would have taken longer, but 30 to 45 days is great. Keep in mind large players like BlackRock wouldn't be wasting time with a spot Bitcoin ETF if their investors weren't already asking for it. Their investors want exposure. The influx of capital we could see in just a month after approval could be enormous. Dixon goes on to say he thinks the price of Bitcoin will appreciate, but then come back down after approval. Then larger increases will happen after the ETF's launch. This is definitely possible if people are holding now in anticipation of the green light and just want to make a few bucks off of it. It sounds like that's what Dixon is thinking too. Alternative take. Meager effect on Bitcoin's price. An unpopular opinion around all of this is that these ETFs won't be the end-all be-all everyone is making them out to be. Is it possible they don't jack up Bitcoin's price after all? Keep in mind Canada and Europe already have spot Bitcoin ETFs. No massive wave of new capital flooded the markets there. The U.S. markets are a different beast, however, and ETFs are the gold standard investment. The ETF market is over $7 trillion, in fact, and a lot of those assets in the ETF space could be bought separately with as much barrier to entry as Bitcoin or gold. We think this alternative take that Bitcoin spot ETFs won't have a material effect on Bitcoin's price is probably wrong. So if Bitcoin is going to explode long-term and short-term, is it safe to assume that Ethereum will as well once an Ethereum spot ETF is approved? Yes. Ethereum doesn't have quite the same double whammy coming up like the halving and ETF approvals, but it should still see a pretty meteoric rise just from an ETF approval. Keep in mind we still have the completion of Ethereum 2.0 as well. Realistically speaking, we would expect a drastic price increase for any cryptocurrency up for ETF approval. It just makes everything so much easier for any and all traders to get into the asset. For Ethereum, we would expect it to add approximately $500 to $1,000 per coin, and most likely get back into the $4,000 to $5,000 range relatively quickly. Do you think a Solana ETF is possible? Let us know in the comments what other ETFs may be on the horizon. As always, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe for more amazing content. Smash that like button too. See you in the next video.